What's up, everybody? Welcome into double coverage of Patriots Training Camp 2021. It's the Next Pats podcast feed is getting this. And, of course, the Patriots Talk Podcast feed is getting this. We have double coverage because we are back at it again. New England Patriots on the field today. And, Phil, we already have movement in the quarterback competition that Bill Belichick said would not happen. Anointed the starter in April. It was Cam Newton, backed off it a little bit when he talked about everybody having to establish a level. And if we're talking establishing levels, what level did you see Mac Jones at compared to Cam Newton on day one?
Slightly ahead. I mean, if they're starting from a clean slate, as Bill Belichick put it, and they started clean before practice today, at the end of practice today, I would put Mac Jones ahead of Cam Newton. He is clearly, to me, after one day, it's one day, we understand that, he's the better passer. He's more accurate. He's more decisive, Tom. And that, to me, is actually what stands out more, is just the rhythm with which the offense can operate when Mac Jones is behind center. You know, you can look at some of the completion numbers, and we can get into some of those from practice today, and I think they're a little misleading because they're pretty close in terms of the number of completions, overall number of attempts for both guys. With Cam Newton, I would say about half his completions, maybe even, a tick or two more, came after lengthy stays behind center in the pocket. Late. They come a little bit late. And so that, to me, is what stood out. The quicker decision maker, the more accurate passer today, decisively, Mac Jones.
And you guys have watched enough football over the years, too. You know the mistakes come late. And we saw that with Cam Newton. Before we get into the numbers, let's get to a couple of plays right off the top that are etched in your mind that kind of represent what both guys were all about. I'm going to start first. I'm going to talk about Cam Newton's rep that kind of explained to me what he was all about, what his day was all about. And it wasn't the more egregious of his two picks. It was the first one, which came in a red zone situation. He's looking short. Probably the ball was scrimmaged probably from around the 5-yard line. He saw a crosser, which I believe came from inside the tight end position. Watched him come across, but didn't react. Looked hard. And then late and hard, he tried to get the ball to James White, probably about 3-4 yards deep in the end zone, threw Leighton behind him, glanced off what could have been his bicep or shoulder pad, and was picked off by Raekwon McMillan. That's a combination of see it, don't recognize it, don't pull the trigger, have to circle back and find the next spot. His eyes didn't dart immediately, and when he did throw, it wasn't accurate. So it's the triple threat position of Cam Newton.
And again, to me, it comes back to the timing, because the accuracy wasn't incredibly off the way it was, I believe, day one of minicamp, where it was a little rainy, and the NBC Sports Boston video, which I think our guy Moose shot, went viral, essentially, because there were footballs being sprayed all over the place. That wasn't necessarily the case today, but his most inaccurate pass led to that second interception. Short front corner of the end zone, intended for Hunter Henry. It's late again, thrown well behind him, and so far behind Hunter Henry that it looked almost like it was intended for Adrian Phillips.
Right. It wasn't even tipped up. It wasn't even a position as he made his cut, starting from the right side of the formation, just a little out, right there at the doorstep of the end zone. You saw Julian Edelman do it a million times. Saw Gronk do it. It's a simple route. Just throw it at the pylon where nobody else can get it. And as you said, hit him in stride to a degree.
Right. He brought the defense back into play with where he put it, and that is the biggest issue, is when he gets inaccurate, especially when you're down in the low red zone like that, Tom. And I think that's worth noting to the listeners here. The entire practice was red zone passing game, and so your mistakes are going to be amplified down there. The deflections could turn into picks, as they did with that James White play. The misses are more dangerous because of where you are on the field. Everything's condensed. Everything moves more quickly. The windows are tighter. To me, it amplified what both of these quarterbacks are right now. Mac Jones is the quicker decision maker, the more accurate guy. His skill set gets highlighted in a practice like this in a good way. For Cam Newton, it's the opposite. I mean, he might be the best red zone runner ever, right, Tom?
Yep.
But they're not in pads. Running's not an option. Is he going to be somebody who threads the needle, when the traffic is there consistently because of the nature of the area where you are on the field? He's not that guy.
Think about what we're saying. Cam Newton came into the league in 2011? 12.
I was going to say 10. So let's split the baby and call it 11.
Okay. This was Mac Jones' first July practice. He's never practiced in a full squad situation in the NFL. And yet we're talking about him as being the better red zone decision maker, the better down low decision maker, the more decisive of the two players. Not by miles and miles and miles, but if you're going to chart this on the old XY axis that you talked about on the Patriots Talk podcast previously and had my brain leak out my ears, if we're going to talk about charting it, you have a guy who just walked into the NFL. He's still got the afterbirth all over him. He still just had the cord cut. Yeah, it's nasty to think about, but he is newly delivered into the NFL, and he's already quicker on the take and on the draw than Cam Newton. That, to me, is arresting.
It is to me as well, but that's why Mac Jones was a first-round pick.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, he doesn't have the arm. He's not an athlete. The reason he was considered by some, not all, to be a first-round type of talent is because of these kinds of things. That's why I say his skill set's really highlighted here. When it's
100%.
third and long in the middle of the field, he's not going to truly shine, I don't believe.
If you need a 28-yard in on 3rd and 17,
Might be
I'm
tough.
not saying you want Cam, but I'm just saying it's going to, as your point is excellent, this exacerbates the shortcomings of Cam Newton as a passer because you don't have a long time for guys to adjust to the ball, make a play on the ball, throw guys open, whatever else you want to talk about.
And to Mac's credit, he wasn't working with the ones as consistently as Cam Newton was. So Cam Newton was out there consistently with what we would consider the first-team offense and first-team quote-unquote weapons. Mac Jones got a little bit of both. So, like, the offensive line would sub in and out, so he got some time with, the first-team tackles, whatever. He got some time with Nelson Aguilar or Jonnu Smith, but it wasn't as consistent. So he was working with more of a hodgepodge group, and I thought, still had the better day.
I will add this one thing about the pick that you mentioned that went directly to Adrian Phillips. There was an offensive lineman behind the offense, and I had my binoculars trained on Cam Newton and kind of close up on the play. After the pick, I noticed the three linemen. I put my binoculars back up to my eyes and took a look, and you could see by the expression on the face of one of the two linemen that he was registering tremendous distress of what he had just seen.
Was it like bitter beer face
It was
type
a
of deal?
combination of that didn't really just happen. Now, it could have been anything. Maybe the guy next to him had gas. I don't know.
You really don't know.
But it was arresting.
It's early in training camp, but these guys' schedules are all thrown off, so it could lead to all sort of intestinal
It might have been
distress.
gas.
You're right. Yeah.
Could have been gas.
Yeah.
All right, still, before we get to the numbers, give me a couple of plays that illustrate Mac Jones's day in your mind.
I'll give you a couple. The first that comes to mind for me, because it does get to the decision-making as well as the accuracy aspect of his game that I noticed today. It was early in the practice. It was, again, low red zone. All of these throws essentially were low red zone. And he's looking for a quick hitter to Jonnu Smith. Little out route into the end zone. Jonnu Smith is so well covered, he's almost fallen down, near the top of his route where he's about to make his break. Mac Jones comes off him immediately, works his way all the way across the field to the opposite side of the field. I don't know how many reads, how many receivers and possible targets he's going through as he does that, but he ends up throwing to Nelson Aguilar in the total opposite side of the field in the opposite corner, leading him, throwing with anticipation, something we saw from him again today, leading him to a spot in the back of the end zone. He's got plenty of space, plenty of separation, easy touchdown. But that to me is going through your progressions and being decisive. Being decisive isn't just catching the ball and throwing it immediately, which we saw Cam Newton do a couple times, and it didn't go real well for him. It's processing quickly. And if the first guy's not there, who's your second, who's your third option, and can you execute within the structure of the play so that the play is still on time and in rhythm? And that one really stood out to me early on, that play to Aguilar.
Yeah, because the field is so compressed, if you come off what you're looking at, you better be able to go to the next one and release it at the same time. And I'm not preaching to a Heisman Trophy winner. I mean, it's got to sound like that. And a former MVP. It's got to sound like that. And I'm sorry that it sounds like that because I am aware of it. But in observing it, it does have to work that way. And there was a play that I liked from Jones, almost similar, but it was hitting Kendrick Bourne on the dead friggin' run at the back of the end zone on a dart. He's not going to throw like Justin Herbert or Trevor Lawrence. He's not going to have the velocity down the field, and he is short. I don't give a crap how much bullshit I got. Pushback from saying that he was smaller. He is short relative to what we've been looking at in New England for 20 years.
Right. He's shorter than Brady.
Okay, so the ball does have to have some interesting arcs to it. But he threw an absolute bullet on a platter to a dead run asshole and Kendrick Bourne. All he had to do was put his hands up and close his fingers a little bit, and it was a touchdown. He did both of those things. It was a touchdown. Those are the throws. They're not jaw-dropping throws. They're eye-opening throws. I wrote that today. Because it makes you go, I didn't see that guy open. I didn't think that was a big enough window to get it to, but he did. So that's why I think those are the things you're going to see when you come down here, folks.
Right. And it's not jaw-dropping in that the velocity is not exceptional. It's not an off-platform Patrick Mahomesian no-look.
Yeah.
So it's just the window's there. He's NFL open. This target, can you get it there? And he does, and he did today at least. We'll see. He's a rookie, Tom. He's going to have bad days.
Practice, you're right.
And listen, let's bring a little balance. If the people feel like we're unbalanced, but let's bring a little balance to it right now. Mac Jones had to run a lap, the first lap at training camp for any Patriot today, because he botched a snap and then the footwork / exchange action that you have with a jet sweep type of handoff. I don't know if he was supposed to fake it to the jet motion man, if he was supposed to give it to that guy. He screwed it up. It wasn't fumbled, but it was almost fumbled, and he was sent for a lap.
Tremendous round of applause that he could track. I don't know whether fans actually are wise to it yet. When they're taking a lap during practice, that's not a victory lap. That's not. They're not doing that because things went real good and Bill wants to have them on display like a runway model.
Right.
They're doing that because they F something up real good.
And then I would say in the 7-on-7 period,
so don't clap.
Mac Jones was not accurate. It was like for, the 5 minutes or whatever that period ran, he had 4 attempts, he completed 1. He threw behind his target on one of them. It was broken up by Kyle Van Noy. He threw behind to a second target. It was broken up by Jawan Williams. So it was not a perfect day for him. And on Cam's end, the good side of it, you mentioned this, late in the practice, a back shoulder throw, but sort of a low back shoulder throw to N'Keal Harry, really accurate. He was really well covered for a touchdown. And he also completed, I think it was 4 of his first 5 throws of practice. So, there's stuff to work on there. I would just say for Cam, what's got to be frustrating for him is the way he finished practice was 3 straight incompletions, 2 of which were totally uncatchable. And that pick to Adrian Phillips that was well behind Hunter Henry, that was it. That was the last competitive rep he got of the day. And so he's going to have to come back the way he came back on practice 3 of minicamp and try to be the best guy in practice tomorrow.
If this was a boxing match, how would you have scored day 1? Because it's usually 10-9. You got to get knocked down to have it 10-8. You got to get knocked down a couple times to have it 10-7. Most rounds are 10-9. I think this was a 10-9 round.
I'd go 10-9 as well. I think 10-8 is probably a little drastic, but I wouldn't be surprised if there's some 10-8s on the board.
I would be. Yeah, I would be. I'd be amenable to having somebody say 2 picks. That's a knockdown. 2 picks equals 1 knockdown. That's a 10-8. But what ends up happening in boxing could well end up happening here too. You get a bunch of 10-9 rounds, and it's 7th round, and the next thing you know, you're down 7 points. You're not making up in 1 round.
Right.
And Phil and I talked about it, and it's going to be fascinating to see if it ends up being incrementally Mac Jones or the 2 are in a dead heat. They might have to say, look, it's not getting any better for our guy here. Our anointed starter has to be low. We have to take the Nointy away.
And you don't want to have your Nointy taken away. Can I just give you 2 more just very small miniature nuggets on Mac Jones's day, because I was so dialed in on the quarterbacks today. And you can read our quarterback report. We're going to do one of those after every practice. It's on NBCSportsBoston.com. Please go check it out. A lot of detail there on the entirety of the day, including what some of these guys were doing in between their reps of practice, where they got their 3, 4, 5, whatever it is, plays in a row. Both of my nuggets are Mac Jones related. One of them is just that he was tied to the hip of Josh McDaniels again today, and vice versa. Early in the practice, they break up so that Mac Jones goes to throw to the receivers. Cam Newton and Brian Hoyer stay at the opposite end of the field to throw to the tight ends and backs. Josh McDaniels goes with Mac Jones. No huge surprise there. After every period in which Mac Jones finished his stretch of play on the field, immediately right back to Josh McDaniels, and conversation is going on, and they watch a rep of whether it's Newton or Brian Hoyer, and they might, in silence watch that rep, but then the conversation kicks right back up again, and it looks like they're gesturing towards that play, that throw, whatever that situation is. Here's how it should be done, XYZ. I don't know what they're saying. I'm just guessing. It just stood out to me, the amount of conversation they were having, whereas Cam Newton did some of that as well. And I'm not saying it's not like Josh McDaniels and Cam Newton don't talk during practice. It's just not to the same degree.
Right.
He's with the offensive lineman. Cam might be. He might be by himself for a little while, just sort of observing. The other nugget for Mac Jones, to me, that was really interesting, was he got a little pissy at one point in practice.
Yeah.
At the very end, with J.J. Taylor, who's a second-year guy. It's not like he's a veteran guy or anything, but he apparently, according to Mac Jones at least, ran the wrong route on a little swing route. It ended up being an incomplete pass. As soon as the ball hit the turf, Mac Jones throws the palms to the sky. He's looking right at J.J. Taylor, and he beelines it to J.J. Taylor. He was hot. And he's very expressive in terms of trying to show J.J. Taylor how he felt that particular route should have been run.
And you did call my attention to it. He backed it off within a 3 to 5
heartbeat.
seconds.
It wasn't like he reamed this guy out. It turned into supportive coach
arm
mode,
around him and all
gave
that,
him
yeah.
a pat on the ass, and they went about their business after that. But that stood out to me, Tom, just because we have seen young quarterbacks come through, not first round pick quarterbacks, but we've seen young quarterbacks come through. They don't typically act that way. That's something they would let Josh McDaniels handle in the meeting room after practice.
Or that it's a Brady thing. I mean, the only person I think I would see be demonstrative would be Hoyer.
Hoyer would do that too.
I don't think
You're right.
Ever saw, but Hoyer's been in the league since 2009.
Sure.
Yep. So I could see that, but I don't know. Jacoby Brissett. Here's one last observation on the quarterbacks before we hit your numbers real quick. Whether it's Jacoby Brissett or Jimmy Garoppolo or Jarrett Stidham, what we're talking about with Mac Jones is unusual. Because him to Cam is not apples to apples necessarily in terms of experience. But when we're talking about the first training camp practice and how they look in that low red zone, as Phil's calling it, it's not even comparable. I mean, there were times Jimmy Garoppolo didn't know whether to poop or go blind, and he was a 4-year player at Eastern Illinois, admittedly, but 4-year player. Threw the ball a hell of a lot over his 4-year career in college than Mac Jones did. Jacoby Brissett. He didn't look that great. Part of the reason he ended up Indianapolis Colt. He just couldn't decide what to do with the football. That's why he took about 55 sacks in his 1 year as a starter there as well. And Jarrett Stidham, inconsistent reactions to pressure. Could be good, could be bad. The wheel of fortune spins every time he drops back. But Mac Jones has the concept down. And that's where, leave Cam out of it, it's bizarre to watch. They did a good job picking him. Stephon, I want to go through a little attendance stuff. You want to hit the numbers? Hit the numbers.
Well, I'll just give them the numbers real quick, but just numbers a reminder. I mean, I do feel like these are a little misleading because, again, I just thought there was one guy who was more decisive and got rid of it more quickly than the other. So in the 11-on-11 periods, Cam Newton went 8 for 15 with 2 picks. Mac Jones went 9 for 17. Brian Hoyer went 8 for 15. A lot of reps for Brian Hoyer. In the 7-on-7 period, that's when Jones went cold for a brief stretch. It was right smack dab in the middle of practice. He went 1 for 4. Newton went 3 for 4. So, overall, you're talking 11 for 19 for Cam, and you're talking 10 for 21 for Mac Jones in terms of the competitive reps. So the numbers are very similar, but I think if you were there and you were watching, you saw the offense operate one way with one guy and operate a little bit differently with the other.
The Patriots have re-signed former practice squad player Jake Dolagala. Now, with Jake back in the fold, that means the Patriots now have 5 quarterbacks. Okay? It's a lot. Unless they need to have a starting rotation, that's too many.
Who knows how many they have by the time this podcast is published?
I want a bold prediction. I don't want you to just speculate. I want a bold prediction on what it means for the rest of the quarterback group.
A bold prediction? A bold prediction would be they would do something like trade Jarrett Stidham or release Brian Hoyer. I'm not sure they're going to do either of those things, Tom. My bold prediction is that they'll carry 5 quarterbacks for a hot second. I think what they could do right now is they could split some of those Hoyer reps with Dolagala. Eventually, Stidham comes back, but by the time that happens, maybe you feel okay letting Brian Hoyer go. Maybe you feel okay letting Cam Newton go. If Mac Jones clearly and decisively stakes his claim to that number 1 job, I am of the belief that it's probably not a good idea to keep Cam Newton around. Just to have him, not that he's a bad guy or a bad teammate, but to have that presence kind of over Mac Jones's shoulder I'm not sure is really fair to Mac Jones if it's his job.
I think
it's just depth right now, but
okay.
5 is a lot of quarterbacks. There's no doubt.
There's too much that Cam Newton can bring you in situational football during the year to divorce yourself from him. There is relevance. There is relevance there. Rob
He
Ninkovich
definitely
talked about it.
does.
Do you want to hear my bold prediction?
I just don't know if that relevance, is it worth it to deal with all the other stuff? The
don't know if
questions
there
from
is,
us,
but
the the quote-unquote distractions. I hate that term. But I could see them saying, ugh, this is just going to be a lot to deal with, Cam. We got to let you go.
Yeah. I mean, because you will have him smoking a cigar and swirling a brandy talking about how he got hosed. You know what it means? It means Jarrett Stidham's going to get traded to the Houston Texans. That's
Okay.
my bold prediction.
I like that. That is bold. That's much bolder than me just saying they're just going to roll with the guys they have.
Yeah, they're going to keep all 5. All right.
I mean, it's so vanilla. It's kind of bold. You got to admit it.
It's a bold vanilla. It's full-bodied. Listen, let's update you real quick on some of the guys who were and were not at practice, and I'm going to wrap it up because, again, they were in not even shells, they shorts and jerseys with their helmets on. That's not shells, right? Moose, is that shells?
No.
Shells.
Nope.
Shells are those little.
Yeah, you get the little mini pads.
Yeah, the Kevlar. Kyle Van Noy was out and partaking with a red non-contact jersey. Trent Brown was also on the field today. They were both on the
physically unable to perform list very briefly.
Active PUP list. There's a fleet of guys who are on the PUP list. Chase Winovich.
Ramondre Stevenson.
Thank you.
Stephon Gilmore.
Zing. Stephon Gilmore came out and was very attentive. Came out at 11:15 after the 10 o'clock start. Very attentive on the sideline, engaged. God bless him. He's got a contract imbroglio. Additionally, let's hit on N'Keal Harry, who I wondered what kind of N'Keal would we get? A disinterested N'Keal? An engaged N'Keal? I ain't going out there unless I get traded N'Keal, which would be tough. But the N'Keal you got was a guy who had a couple of touchdown catches and didn't look horrendous at all.
No, not horrendous. And, even in some of those pre-team period drills that they have, you can see him go up and attack and high point the football. But, there are also times where he's still getting a little bit of extra instruction because he's sort of letting it fall into the breadbasket as opposed to turning and turning it into a rebound. Guy was a phenomenal high school basketball player. You would think, he's looking to do that at every opportunity, but you saw him get a little extra instruction today there as well. So a good day. He's a large human being. And the reason I say that is because when he jumps and he lands on the turf, you don't have to be very close to hear him land. Mm-hmm. And there's the only person I can remember covering who reminded me of that sound actually was Aaron Hernandez, believe it or not. You could hear him making his cuts because he was so big and so explosive and powerful. He'd stick his foot in the ground and it was like hitting a bass drum. N'Keal Harry, obviously not the same kind of athlete, not the same kind of guy, but maybe, Tom, he's going to build on something here, gives himself some value so that they can trade him for something in return.
God willing, not the same kind of guy. I'm going to...
Or football player.
No,
stick with that.
Folks, I think it's also important to underscore that the Patriots wide receiver and tight end group as a whole, their pass catchers, they might be the most competent they've been since 2017. And I know you're sitting there going, whoa. Julian Edelman was here. Rob Gronkowski was here. Well, Gronk was only here in 2018. So it's 19, 20, 21. This is the third year post-Gronk. And Edelman, he was here, but he was in 2018, not with the team at the start of the year. So the Cordero Pattersons and Chris Hogan's and Philip Dorsett's and Braxton Berrios's, look, Ryan Izzo's, Matt Lacosse's, Devin Asiasi's, and Dalton Keene's, they have now yielded to Hunter Henry, Nelson Aguilar, Jonnu Smith, Jacoby Myers, who again had a very good practice, and Kendrick Bourne, who also had a good practice. I'm not saying that this is anybody's idea of a top 10 group, those 5, but at least it's not 28, 29, or 30.
I talked to an
AFC
evaluator the night before today's practice. I don't know when this is going to be published, so that was a weird way to describe the timeline.
It's going to go out
but
today.
Okay.
Weirdo.
And he was talking about their
Wednesday.
weapons, and he said, listen, are they an elite group? No. But they're a lot better than they've been in a long time. And when he said that, I said, well, it hasn't been that long, has it? But you're right. It's 2017. That's a long time in the NFL. So they should be markedly improved. And even if Cam is playing, he should be an improved quarterback. I just, the question is going to be, are you not giving yourself a chance to max out at that position based on whether or not Mac Jones can kind of continue on this track that he showed day one?
And I think that'll be one of the interesting things, because we've spent time in this offseason saying, well, these guys really like Cam. They wanted to come here and play with Cam. And what happens if Cam doesn't get the job? It only takes a few throws behind Hunter Henry for everyone that get picked off at the goal line, for everyone to say, boy, we can't have that.
Can't have it. Can't have it.
What we can have?
Training Camp Central.
It's Training Camp Central coming up at 6 o'clock. After that, there'll be early edition. And, of course, all week long we'll have Training Camp Central at 6 o'clock on NBC Sports Boston. The next Pats podcast will be back at you. We're going to have a Tom Curran's Patriots Talk podcast also on Thursday. We appreciate, thank you, folks on the next Pats pod, for having me along. And everybody, if you're not already on my pod stream following Phil, I don't understand why not, but you got to get on that. It's the next Pats podcast. Thanks, everybody. Take care.